Can NBA media and podcasts collectively decide to stop talking about Giannis Antetokounmpo being traded? It was fun to speculate on for a while. I mean, people have been doing it for like 6 fucking years at this point. But I think we've gotten to the point where Giannis is going to stay with the Bucks, and we know that now. Look, Giannis is already stamped, but that's kind of besides the point. You know, MVP multiple times, Finals MVP, won a title, all that. But also the other factor of this is that like he's basically a player GM at this point, and it doesn't really get talked about quite as much. I guess because he's the first international player GM, and we're used to the LeBron James or Kevin Durant's being the player GMs. But it's very obvious that Giannis has a hand in what's going on in Milwaukee. And this isn't a criticism of Giannis. This is just how it is. It started with the Drew Holiday trade where he put pressure on the front office back in 2020. They make the splash trade for Drew. They end up winning a title. Works out great for everyone. Flash forward to a few years later, the Bucks have a few disappointing playoff exits. Their half-court offense doesn't look great. They go out and they trade for Damian Lillard, someone that Giannis has always wanted to play for. That obviously didn't work out at all. 2 years they played together. They never got out of the first round. They couldn't stay healthy. Honestly, I think the Giannis and Dame thing could have worked if they had a better supporting cast, but the supporting cast was just old and broken down and not good enough, and that ended up in the current predicament that they're in right now. Giannis could say that he wasn't involved in that trade at all because he, was friends with Drew and doesn't want to upset anyone, but it was very obvious that he had a hand in that. Then the Bucks try to get younger. They trade for Kyle Kuzma, someone who Giannis has worked out with. Chris Middleton, who's one of his longtime teammates and friends, gets traded, but this is basically because Chris is not available. It makes more sense for them to try to go get someone else. Now, I wouldn't have traded for Kyle Kuzma, to be clear. I've never been a Kyle Kuzma fan. You can go back and look at all my posts and my podcasts from that time, but I was not a huge fan of that move at all. Now they wave and stretch Damian Lillard. Giannis acts like he doesn't know what's going on, and they sign Miles Turner. Another move to get younger, a little bit more athletic. Positionally, it makes more sense. But the conclusion of this is that Giannis is fine in Milwaukee, at least for the next year or two. This window is going to be the window for them to possibly win another championship with him. I don't think that they have a championship level team right now. We'll see what happens. But until then, I'm putting a pause on all Giannis trade talk until we get an actual formal request. He's throwing shots at people in the media that keep doing it. And I expect this from Shams and Windhorse and the guys where it's their jobs to kind of push these rumors. But when we're getting a segment on the Low Post still, and it's obvious that he's not asking out, Zach Lowe, you should know better at this point. I just don't want to hear about the Giannis stuff. He's happy. He's basically the player GM there. Let's ride it out. Let's see what happens. And then later we can address it if this thing doesn't work out. I think that's the plan anyway.